are back with part 2 of this week's reading of the Messianic Jewish Family Bible, True Life Version. And this week we are reading 2 Samuel chapters 1 through 12. I was kind of doing a recap of the introduction in chapter 1, and I ran kind of over, so I'm hoping that part 1 had taken. So as we move on, we're going to see as we read this week in 2 Samuel 5 to 11, David was declared to be king over all Israel, and he moved the capital of the nation to the city of Jerusalem, that is later known as the city of David. But at this particular time, Jerusalem had been called Jebus, Jebus, after the Jebusites. So in First Chronicles chapter 11, verse 4, it says, "And David and all Israel went to Jerusalem, which is Jebus, where the Jebusites were, the inhabitants of the land. All of the tribes acknowledged that David had the right to be their king." And then in 2 Samuel verses 5, 1 through 5, it talks about this and making, then came all the tribes of Israel to David unto Hebron and spoke to him, saying, "Behold, we are thy bone and thy flesh. Also in times past when Saul was king over us, you were he had led out and brought in Israel, and the Lord was with you. Thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be a captain over Israel." So all the elders of Israel came to the king to Hebron, and King David made a league with them in Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. Now, I understand Samuel had already taken David aside when he was very young and had anointed him with oil after the Ruach had left King Saul, as God had Samuel go find the next king. And he had gone to Jesse, and he had seen all of David's brothers, and David had been out in the field, in the fields with the sheep, and he had asked Jesse, "Is this all the sons that you have?" And Jesse said, "No, there's David, my youngest." And he needed to see David and knew that the Ruach HaKodesh let him know that he was the one. So he anointed David. But at this point, when we're reading 2 Samuel, Samuel is no longer alive either. So David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem, he reigned 33 years over all of Israel and Judah. The Davidic covenant is seen in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 8 through 16. And this is one of the greatest passages in the Bible, which we're going to get to. And David's line was confirmed by the prophets. 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 8 to 16. Like I said, we're gonna actually read that. I'm going to read it from the King James Version actually right now, and it says, "Now therefore so shalt thou say unto my servant David, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I took thee from the sheepcote, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people, over Israel. And I was with thee whithersoever thou went, and have cut off thine enemies out of thy sight, and have made thee a great name, like unto the name of the great men that are in the earth. Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may dwell in a place of their own, and move no more. Neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them any more as before time. And as since the time that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and have caused thee to rest from all thine enemies, also the Lord tells thee that he will make thee a house. And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with your fathers, I set up your seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish your kingdom." What he's telling David is the seed through David is going to be established, that the kingdom will be established through David. And as we know, Yeshua came through that line, through the tribe of Judah and through David. And as we see that, uh, moving forward with the Bible, he shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his king forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men, but my mercy shall not depart away from him. Now, here he's addressing Solomon, as we're going to see further, that David was not permitted to build the house of God, but Solomon was. So he was making a promise to David, that would happen. As I took it from Saul, whom I put away before thee, and thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. And Isaiah 11:1 in the King James Version says, and there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And that's referring to Yeshua and the bloodline. Jesse was David's father. So as you see, it's actually referring to that promise that God made to David. And Jeremiah 23, verse 5 also says, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch, and a king shall reign and prosper, and shall execute justice and judgment and justice in the earth. Added to the previous prophecies, the announcement by the angel Gabriel to Mary in Luke chapter 1, 32 to 33 says, He shall be great and shall be called the Son of the Highest, and the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David. So I'm reading this ahead of time because it is very important to see the connection. And he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of the kingdom there shall be no end. The Davidic covenant. This is the Davidic covenant. It is a divine confirmation of the throne of Israel. The covenant is the perpetuation of the Davidic rule. The covenant is unconditional because it will be fulfilled in the Messiah. The covenant is a sure prophecy of Jesus Christ, of Yeshua. So this was already a covenant that was established back in the days of David. The first prophecy was made to Adam in Genesis 3, verse 15. And this prophecy was made to a race of people in general. And Genesis 3, verse 15 says, I will put animosity, and in some Bibles it says enmity, between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He will crush your head, and you will crush his heel. And that's in reference to Messiah coming the first time and defeating the serpents, defeating Satan. So that was a promise to a race of people in general that was given way back in Genesis verse 15. The second prophecy was made to Abraham in Genesis 22 verse 18. And this prophecy was made to a nation in the race of people, the nation of Israel, the nation, well, actually, which would later be named Israel through Jacob. And that verse says, In your seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed because you obeyed my voice. So God is already establishing the people of of the bloodline of Abraham, which would be his chosen people. And as I mentioned, Jacob, his name was changed to Israel. And then you've got the 12 tribes. I'm not sure. My recording stopped, and I'm moving on with the third prophecy that was made to Jacob as I was hedging towards, who was later named Israel. In Genesis chapter 49, verse 10, and this prophecy was made to a tribe in the nation, and that would have been the tribe of Judah.
And that verse reads, "The scepter will not pass from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until he to whom it belongs will come." And that is speaking of Yeshua. To him will be the obedience of the peoples. And then the next prophecy continues, and that's the fourth prophecy, was made to David in 2 Samuel chapter 7. And this prophecy was made to the one family in that tribe of Judah, which that's what we're talking about right now. So you can see how God orchestrated this through from the beginning um, of the race of people, and how he was going to bring Messiah through a chosen branch of people. And when we get down to the family level, that family, of course, was David's family. And we see in 2 Samuel verses 8 to 10, David's reign was at its peak. And in chapter 11, David does commit a great sin. And when we get into chapter 12, David confesses of this great sin. We read about the birth of Solomon, and David had defeated his enemies, and the kingdom actually had a time of prosperity, which was enjoyed in the land, but it ended when David's passion and lust caused him to sin with Bathsheba, then leading to the planning of the death of Bathsheba's husband, Uriah. Even though David repented of sin, the Lord promised division and bloodshed in David's house. And in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 10, it's stated, "Now therefore the sword shall never depart from thine house, because thou hast despised me and hast taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be thy wife." So what we're also going to see next week is how that judgment came on the house of, on the actual family of David, and how that is true. We're going to see what happens with David's children, the strife that occurs, and even though God blesses David, and David still continues to be a man after God's heart because he's very repentant, and God does love David, very much so. We see how this judgment does come about, and I will point that out next week, when we get into some of that. In 2 Samuel reveals God's working in history. Even though human beings were very sinful, and God must judge, God still worked through them to accomplish his divine plan for redemption, which came through Messiah Yeshua, the King of Kings. God still works in history and is working through the church today. Even though members of the body of Messiah are sinful, God still works through us to accomplish his will. David did look for the coming of Messiah, and he yearned to build a house for God. But God would not allow David to build a house for him because David had killed people there in all of the wars that he was involved in. There was shed blood. So God did grant permission to David's son Solomon to build a house for him, and David served as a forerunner of Yeshua, the root of Jesse. In his zeal and commitment to the Lord, David combined the offices of prophet, priest, and king. The Ruach HaKodesh is seen to be very active in the life of David, and also in the life of the prophet Nathan, in convicting David of his sin against God, which we're going to see as we move forward. Through the prophet Nathan, the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, revealed David's sin, and also righteousness was accomplished and judgment was spelled out. We can relate this event that happened in David's life to our present day's life, and we can see the Ruach HaKodesh working our lives and the lives of people around us as he convicts the world of sin and brings forth righteousness. We also see the work of the Ruach HaKodesh today through his work in the church and in individuals, as well as the mighty hand of God moving through the earth and the universe. So that is basically a recapping of the introduction and of chapter 1. So now we're going to move forward in reading. chapter 2. And as we read in chapter 1, David mourned Saul and Jonathan because he had learned that they had they had been killed in battle in Mount Gilboa. So there's a couple segments here in chapter 2. The first one is Judah anoints David king. Now it came to pass after this that David inquired of Adonai, saying, Should I go up to one of the towns of Judah? Adonai said to him, Go up. Where shall I go up? David asked. To Hebron, he said. So David went up there along with his two wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. David also brought up his men that were with him, each with his household, and they settled in the towns of Hebron. Then the men of Judah came, and there anointed David king over the house of Judah. Then they told David, saying, It was the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul. So David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, Blessed are you of Adonai for showing this kindness to Saul your Lord by burying him. So now may Adonai show you kindness and faithfulness, and I also will show you goodness because you have done this thing. Now therefore be strong and brave, for Saul your Lord is dead, and also the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. Next segment is forces of Abner and Joab battle. Now Abner, son of Ner, Saul's army commander, had taken Saul's son, Ishbosheth, and brought him over to Mahanaim. I keep calling it. We have a town kind of similar to that, so I always mess up that name. It's Mahanaim, Mahanaim. Then he made him king over Gilead, Asher, Jezreel, Ephraim, and Benjamin, over all Israel. Saul's son Ishbosheth was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned for 2 years. So what's happening here is Abner didn't like this idea of David becoming king over everything. So there was, a Saul's son, Ishbosheth. He took him and decided he was going to make him king over Israel. And David could have Judah, but he was not going to allow David to be king over every part of the Jewish people. So Ishbosheth reigned for 2 years. But the house of Judah followed David, and the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. Once Abner, son of Ner, and the troops of Saul's son Ishbosheth went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon. Meanwhile Joab, son of Zeruiah, and the troops of David went out. They met each other by the pool of Gibeon. So they sat down, one group on one side of the pool, and the other on the other side of the pool. Then Abner said to Joab, Now let the young men get up and compete before us. Let them get up, Joab replied. Then they got up and came forward by number, 12 for Benjamin, and for Saul's son Ishbosheth, and 12 from David's servants. Then each grasped his opponent by the head and thrust his sword in the opponent's side, so they all fell down together. Therefore that place was called Helkath Hazarim, which is in Gibeon. The battle was very fierce that day, and Abner and the men of Israel were defeated before David's servants. Now the three sons of Zeruiah were Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Asahel was as swift-footed as one of the gazelles of the field. Asahel pursued Abner, not swerving to the right or to the left from pursuing Abner. Then Abner looked behind him and asked, Is it you, Asahel? It is I, he answered. So Abner said to him, Turn away from your right or to your left, seize one of the young men, and take his armor for yourself. But Asahel would not turn away from following him. Once again Abner warned Asahel, Turn away from pursuing me. And I'm going to spell Asahel is Asahel. Turn away from pursuing me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How would I ever look your brother Joab in the face? But he refused to turn aside. So Abner struck him with the butt end of the spear in the groin so that the spear came out through his back, and he fell down there and died on the spot. When all who came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died, they stood still. But Joab and Abishai continued pursuing Abner. As the sun was setting, they reached the hill of Ammah, Ammah, which faces Giah, Giah, on the road to the wilderness of Gibeon. Then the sons of Benjamin rallied to Abner and became one group, taking their stand on top of one of the hills. Then Abner called out to Joab and said, "Must the sword devour forever? Don't you realize how bitter it will be in the end? How long until you order the people to stop pursuing their kinsmen?" "As God lives," Joab replied, "if you had not spoken, then surely the people would have gone up until the morning, everyone after his kinsman." So Joab blew the shofar, and all the soldiers halted and pursued Israel no more, nor did they continue to fight any longer. So Abner and his men marched all that night through the Arabah, then crossed over the Jordan and marched through all morning until they reached Mahanaim. Joab returned from pursuing Abner, and when he had gathered all the troops, 19 of David's soldiers besides Asahel were missing. But David's soldiers had struck down many of Benjamin and Abner's men, so that 360 men died. Then they took up Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb, which was in Bethlehem. Joab and his men marched all night until the day dawned on them at Hebron. And I am going to pause it here and come back with chapter 3 and part 3.